Welcome back to Unedited Edits, where every day you miss a shower, your render time goes down. My name is Brandon, and today we're covering how to make this glowing energy border rectangle overlay video effect. Now, this overlay is based off of this free background that you can download right now on YouTube. So if that's all you're interested in, I'll put a link in the description. Feel free to go with that video and download the background. But the whole goal and the point of me doing unedited edits is for somebody who is newer to DaVinci to learn how to make said thing. Today's video is gonna be very fusion heavy. I'm gonna take my time walking through how we can connect certain things and build out this overlay so that you can use it in your own videos, or you can use it as a base to create your own templates. Now, as we go along, if you do have questions, obviously feel free to leave a comment and I'll do my best to get back to them. But I just launched a Discord, and this Discord is a place for other editors and other creators to ask questions, collaborate, learn, improve, and that's gonna be a great resource for anybody who's looking to build out more things like this. Now, the one thing that you are going to need before we start working on this is Patrick Sterling's Proto V2. You don't have to have it, but I'm gonna highly recommend you download it because it's free and it helps build out a lot of these free energy effects. Again, it's not gonna be necessary. I can talk about some workarounds to using it, but your life is just gonna be so much easier if you download and use Proto. So let's go ahead and hop into it. Alrighty, I've got DaVinci open, and this again is what we're going to be making today, this overlay. Not the astronaut, not the 3D astronaut. That is a stock video that I got through Envato Elements, and there's a link for Envato in the description if you want some stock media. But before we actually hop into the Fusion page and make this, let's talk about a couple of the elements that make up this composition, if you will. The first is that we have this thin line of a background, and you'll see it's not perfectly straight. It's got a little distortion to it. It's displaced, and it also moves over time. So if you maybe lock your eyes onto a particular piece of the border, you'll notice that it's got some slight movement to it. The other piece that we've got going on is the actual energetic moving border element, right? And the thing that's a little tricky about this is if you look in this section up top here, it actually tapers off. That's not something that's necessarily straightforward to do in DaVinci. So we're gonna talk about how we would do that and how it works well and some areas that it doesn't work well. And then the other thing that we've got going on is there's a little bit of fuzz that borders around our border that gives a little bit of an aura to this overlay. And the only other thing that I'll point out is that we do have a masked opening that will display the video underneath, and then we have a background that gives it the actual border that we're looking for. And when it's all said and done and we hop into Fusion, this will be our final composition. And it's not nearly as intimidating as you might think, right? We've got a couple of branches and one little tricky thing that's going on in here. So let's go ahead and build this out from scratch. Like I said before, if you are just interested in downloading an overlay like this, there's millions of them on the internet. The point here is for me to help walk you through how to do something like this yourself so you can start building out your own templates and effects. All right, now in order for us to begin to do this, the first thing that we're gonna do is we're going to add a Fusion composition. By default, mine is going to be 5 seconds long. If yours isn't 5 seconds long, it doesn't matter too much. Make it however long you would like it to be. Drag and drop in your Fusion composition, and let's hop into Fusion. Now, the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add our background that we're gonna use. And by default, you could use just a black background. Oh, and real quick, one thing I forgot to mention is that I'm working on a 1080p timeline today and 30 frames per second. Obviously, this would work on any kind of timeline that you would wanna use, but when it comes to me doing some certain keyframes, or some certain sizing things that might become relevant, I don't think it will be, but just wanted to point that out. Something that you can do if you have access to it is you could use a textured background. So I have this nice asphalt texture that, again, got through Envato Elements. If you don't have Envato, it's not a big deal. Use the black background. But something that's nice about using a background like this is when we begin to highlight things with the glow of our border, some of these contrasty regions will begin to highlight as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this, and I'm going to merge it to our background node. And we go back to displaying our media out. There we go. Okay, so we've got our background here, and I'm gonna add a little bit of contrast real quick to our background, and there we go. And now we can start to build out our border. Now there are probably a million ways you could go about creating this, and there's probably a way that's more effective, but this is how I ended up figuring out how to do it. I'll go ahead and add a background node. This is gonna end up being the color of our glow in our border. So I'm gonna make mine, let's do a nice yellow or orange today. That looks good to me. We're gonna go ahead and merge that into our Fusion pipeline. And with this background selected, I'm going to add our first rectangle node. Because I had the background selected, it's going to already connect to the masking input of our background node. And here's where we start building out our border. Go ahead and click on the rectangle node, and let's go ahead and size it first. I found that 0.85 for the width and the height seemed to be a good relationship between the outside black frame and the actual size of the border. Okay, but right now it is completely solid. So in order for us to change that, click on the rectangle node, we're gonna turn off solid. And I found that keeping the border width very thin seemed to work pretty well. So I'm going to change our border width to 0.001. Our green controls overlay is hiding it. You can go up to these three dots up top here and hit show controls to hide that. You can see we have our border. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the controls back on. Okay, but right now our rectangle is pretty dang perfect. There are no imperfections. So what we need to do is we need to add some displacement to it. I don't know if it's called turbulent displace in DaVinci, but I always hear people refer to it as to adding turbulent displace. That's what we're gonna do. We're going to add a displace node. We're gonna add a fast noise node. If you're not familiar with this combo, what this essentially does is it adds in displacement, meaning that DaVinci is going to displace whatever we feed into this node based off of the noise input. We're gonna do a couple things here with the noise. We're gonna change the color to be red and green. That is because in the displace node, we have the option of displacing things based off of RGB values. So by making things red and green, we can isolate those colors to move certain things with the displace node. I'm gonna go back over to the noise tab, and here is gonna be completely up to you and how you want this to feel and look. I'm gonna go ahead and change the detail to 3. I'm gonna go ahead and decrease the contrast just a smidge. And then I'm gonna increase our scale by a good bit, around 17. What I'm looking for here is the size and relationship of our red and green pixels, because essentially, this is gonna be how our rectangle is displaced. Let me go ahead and cycle over to our displace node. I'm gonna change our type from radial to X and Y. And like I said, we have our X channel set to red and our Y channel set to green. So based off of the red and green inputs of the fast noise node, that's how things are gonna displace. Oh, and actually real quick, I forgot, in our fast noise node, let's actually increase our seethe rate. This will give us some motion. Let's do maybe around like 0.11, that's fine. If I were to scrub this forward now, you can see we've got some movement in our noise, which is what we want. Okay, go back to our displace node, X, Y, red and green, and I am only gonna add a little bit of offset and refraction in both these channels. I don't want a lot of movement, I want a subtle amount, just enough to make it feel like this thing is alive and has some motion to it. Okay, so I'm gonna bring down our X offset just a smidge. Then I'm gonna increase the refraction, excuse me, just a bit as well, something like that, 0.005. And then I'm gonna change the Y just a little bit. This is completely up to you. So let me do 0.005 for that as well. Okay, now if we go back to our media out node, and we're to zoom in on an area over here, we can see we got a little bit of motion, a little bit of movement. Now this next bit is where I'm gonna use Patrick Sterling's Proto 2. I'm gonna assume you've downloaded it, and I'm gonna assume you have it installed. If you don't, now's a good time to go in the description, open up his video, download, install, and then come back. So once you've got Proto installed, what you could do is go to your tools, type in Proto, and add it. But if you do it that way, you're gonna lose out on a couple of the controls on the effect. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually go over to my templates menu. Let me move my big face out of the way for just a second. We're gonna go over to the effects tab, templates, and I'm going to look for Sterling Supply Co. And I'm gonna drag and drop in Proto V2 this way. I mean, off rip, that's pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and start messing around with some of these controls to make it look how I like it to look. If you like it like this, cool. And obviously change things to look and feel however you would like. Okay, with our Proto node selected, I went ahead and expanded our inspector tab because we've got a lot of controls to work with. And you might catch me looking off to the left here because I've written down a few of these so that I don't forget. We're gonna leave our threshold settings alone up top, as well as our mask controls. There's no need to touch these. We're gonna start working with some of our core controls. I'm gonna decrease our core size to 0.0004, so 3 zeros and a 4. The rest of these settings we are going to leave alone. Go ahead and collapse core controls, open glow controls. Now we're gonna leave these first two settings alone, but I'm gonna go to the noise detail and decrease this to around 2.5. Go ahead and leave the contrast alone, but I am gonna decrease the brightness just a smidge to like -0.5. I'm gonna leave the scale alone, but for the glow gain, I'm gonna reduce this to about 0.5. And that's gonna be the last for this section, so go ahead and collapse the glow controls. For the master noise controls, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna decrease the seethe rate because I feel like it goes a little too fast. So I'm gonna decrease this to 0.1. Go ahead and collapse that. Pre-colorization. I think we leave this alone. Yep, we leave this alone. And now I'm going to skip our colorize section for just a second because we're gonna do something sneaky with it. And I'm gonna go to the intensity. And the only thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna decrease our post gain to 0.5. All right, and now if we go back to our preview window, you can see we've got our aura. Our fog or haze that's kind of cycling around our border. The glaring issue is that it's a different color, and that's because our colorize is this light blue. We're gonna want it to match our background color. There's a very easy way to do that. We don't have to go to our background color, copy this, and then paste it over there. I'm gonna select our background node up top here. And you know what? I'm actually gonna replace it or rename this so that we remember it for later. So I'm gonna name this, I don't know, main color. And with our main color node, I'm gonna pin this up top here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to our Proto V2 node. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna click on our Proto V2 node, and you'll see that we have our pinned main color node down here at the bottom. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna link the color from this to that. And you do that by right-clicking on the red, green, and blue sliders and going to expression. Right-click on the green, expression, blue, expression. And with these plus icons next to the slider, I'm gonna go ahead and drag and connect them the corresponding RGB of our main color node. Boop. And now, no matter what color we choose to use, it will match for both Proto and our background color. Very nifty, very handy. So let me unpin this. Click off into our composition, and now we've got a working border-ish. It's getting there. It's looking a little bit better. Now, real quick, if you don't have Proto, for whatever reason, you're boycotting Patrick Sterling and you just don't want to download his node, the workaround for doing something like this would be to use a fast noise node and to mask it with a rectangle. So you could add a rectangle node to this, make it non-solid, add some border, add some soft edge, and you could work on building out your own fuzz and glow that way. But I would just add Proto. It makes life so much easier. So if you think about it, we actually have 2 of the main 3 elements done. The last bit is a little bit harder, but we've made our border, we've made our fuzzy border, and now what we're gonna do is we're going to add that thick glowing energy line that pulses around this rectangle. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to drag and select these top 4 nodes here. That's the rectangle, the background node, or our main color node, and then our displace and fast noise, not the Proto node. I want you to hit Control-C to copy them, and then hit Control-Shift and V to paste an instance. You could also right-click and hit Paste Instance as well. If you haven't used an instance before, it's essentially a duplicate or a replica of whatever node you pasted. And all of the properties are linked to the first node. So if I were to change, let's say, the width of this node and I click on the instance rectangle node, you can see that it also changes the width as well. And you'll know it's an instance because the properties will have these green rectangles around it, indicating, hey, this property is linked to the other property, or the other node, excuse me. Go ahead and undo that. Now with our instance node, I'm gonna take the output of our displace down here and merge it back into our main Fusion pipeline. And this will be the basis of our last layer. The reason I'm doing it like this is because we want to add another layer on top, right? We wanna add this glowing layer, but we also want it to follow the exact same displacement and noise of our previous border. If we don't do that, it could go off path and it might look a little bit wonky. It could work, I don't know, this is just how I felt it would work best. Now we're gonna be adding a few nodes in this region right in here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drag these bottom two down here, make a little room, and this guy, then I'm gonna drag our rectangle up here because we're gonna be building some stuff down here. Like I showed in the beginning, the goal is to create this energetic line that has this tapering tail. The way we're gonna create this tapered tail is based off of one of Peach's tutorials, and I will leave a link to that video as well. But in essence, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add motion blur to our rectangular line and then use some bitmap nodes to smooth out that line and help taper it. Okay, so we're gonna do a couple things with our instanced rectangle node. The first is I'm going to de-instance our position, our length, and then I'm also going to de-instance the soft edge and the motion blur. So I'm gonna right click on the length, hit de-instance, right click on the position, hit de-instance, right click on the soft edge, hit de-instance, and then I'm also going over to the settings tab, right clicking on motion blur, de-instance. I'm gonna check motion blur on, and then I'm gonna de-instance all of these properties. So boom, 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 boom. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the controls tab and I'm gonna increase our soft edge to 0.005. That's gonna be the first thing that I do. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna decrease our length to about a quarter. We could do 0.2, 0.25, decrease it to a quarter. And now it's gonna be very faint, but we can change the position around here. And this is gonna be the basis of how we animate our trail, our outlining effect. All right, so the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna add our glow. We're gonna add our glowing effect to our outliner node. And whatever glow node that you would like to use is completely up to you. If you wanna use XGlow, go crazy. I would highly recommend doing it if your PC can handle it and you've got Reactor installed. My PC isn't the fastest, so what I would do and what I did use was my triple glow node. Made a video on it. In essence, all it is 3 soft glow nodes. So I'm not gonna assume you have triple glow installed, so I'm gonna go ahead and add 3 soft glow nodes. So with our first one, the big thing that I'm gonna change here is I'm going to increase our red, green, and blue scales. I want the core of this to be white. I don't want it to be as flat. So I'm gonna increase our color scale here. And then I'm gonna decrease our gain and decrease our glow size. Our gain is at 1 and our glow size is at 0. Now I'm gonna take our first soft glow node here and I'm gonna paste it twice. And the only thing I'm gonna change on our other 2 soft glows is the glow size, because I just wanna help fill out this effect. So with the first glow size, I'm gonna make this, let's do 7. And then for our last one, we're gonna make this real big. So I'm gonna change the glow size to like 100 or maybe 150, maybe 150. I kind of like that. And we can always come back and change these later if we want. All right, so looking a little bit better. So if I were to click on our instanced rectangle node here and were to play around the position, we can start to move this guy around. And this is not a bad effect in itself either. You know, if you wanted to stop here, I think it would work fine enough if you wanted to just change the position. But let's go ahead and continue to build this out and really put the finesse on this effect. Okay. So if you wanted, we could go back to the original rectangle node, copy and paste another instance of that and use that to continue to build out this effect. But then we would have to also go back and de-instance the position and the length and the soft edge again. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to copy our instanced rectangle node, so the one that has some of these properties unlinked, and I'm gonna hit Control-Shift-V on that twice. So I'm going to create 2 instances of our instanced rectangle node. The reason, again, I'm doing that is because I want to be able to change the position and length of these in line with this one. This is going to probably be the only part of the video that could get a little bit confusing, so I do apologize if I go fast. Go ahead and pause and take screenshots of whatever settings that you need to copy. But again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the principles from Peach's videos and apply them here. You know what? To help us remember which is which, I'm going to go ahead and rename our 3 rectangle nodes up top here. So I'm going to name this one Insta1. I'm going to name this one, the middle one, Insta2. Name the far left Insta3. It's not a bad idea when you start to build out fusion compositions like these to also take notes and draw diagrams of things that you've got going on. So you'll notice, like, it's sometimes when I do fusion compositions, what I'll do is I'll add a note and I'll start to write down some of the things I got going on. So I'll say, like, you know, Insta2 and Insta3 are instances of Insta1. Completely up to you, but it's not a bad idea to keep track of some of the things you got going on. Now I'm gonna go ahead and select our 3rd instance over here, Insta3, which is an instance of Insta1. I'm gonna do a couple things. I'm going to turn off the soft edge here. So I'm gonna de-instance our soft edge on Insta3, take that to 0. I'm also previewing this right now, and you can see that in our preview window. Got our rectangle line right there. Okay, and so in order for this effect to work, like I mentioned, this is going to be based off of Peach's tutorial to create a tapering tail on a line. We have to actually have motion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our first instance rectangle node and I'm going to go back to our first frame, keyframe on our position at 0, and then I'm going to go to frame 30. I'm going to change this later, but I just need something to work with so we can visualize the effect that we're making. And I'm going to change our position to 1. And now if I were to go onto, like, say, frame 15, we have some motion in the line. Now, in principle, the way that this effect works is that we're going to create a lot of motion blur on these other 2 instances of lines, and then we're going to refine them using bitmap nodes. Bitmap nodes are a little tricky to get your head around if you haven't used them before, but in essence, what a bitmap node does is it maps a pixel range and refines it based off of certain thresholds that you give it to create a black and white matte. You can see how we build this up as we go. So I'm going to preview our instance 3, the far left one here. And you can see that this is our matte right now. We have our rectangle outliner and it's going around in a circle. And this, at this stage, is exactly the same as our first instance, Insta1. Now, like I said, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dramatically change the motion blur of this line. So I'm gonna go over to the settings and I'm gonna de-instance these 4 properties. So the quality, the shutter angle, center bias, and the sample spread. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the quality up a ton, so like 20. And then the big number that we're gonna change here is the shutter angle. And we're gonna make this something very drastic. I'm gonna go with 8,500. And immediately what you'll see is this extends out our line like crazy. I'm gonna increase our center bias to 1. I'm gonna change the sample spread up to 5. And now we're to look at this, we've got a pretty lengthy tail happening. So this is how we're gonna refine it using the bitmap nodes. So I'm gonna have our Insta3 selected and I'm gonna start to type in bitmap, add 1 there. Just cycle our preview to, let's make sure it's connected to the right input. Cycle our preview here. And as I go through these settings, these are gonna be what I found worked best with this example. These could be variable depending on what you're working with. I'm gonna change our soft edge to 0.0115. I'm gonna take our high threshold here and drop it to 0.5. We're now gonna take this bitmap and bitmap it again. So I'm gonna add a bitmap node. Make sure we're connected to the right thing. We wanna be connecting to the yellow inputs here. Make sure we're not going into the mask input. We want the background input, the image input, excuse me. Okay, and with our second bitmap node, we're gonna leave our soft edge alone, but we're gonna change our high threshold all the way down to like 0.08. Actually, let's do 0.085. And And then the last thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna add an erode dilate node to this. And again, we wanna make sure we're going with the yellow inputs. I'm gonna cycle my view here. I'm gonna change the filter type to circle, and we're going to erode our line. This is gonna be negative 0.002045. There we go, it's looking a little bit better. Okay, this is line 1. We're gonna do the exact same thing with this instance of our node. So now I'm working with insta2, the second instance of our instance node. Eventually what we're gonna do is we're gonna connect all of our rectangle outlines together to make a new mat for our outliner tail. So with our second instance, instant2, go over to the setting tab. And again, we're gonna de-instance. I wonder how many times I've said instance in this video. Somebody do a count for me. But I'm gonna de-instance these properties. And we're gonna go with something a little bit different this time. We're gonna increase our quality actually up to 40. We're gonna increase the shutter angle to about 4,500. Center bias 1, sample spread 5. 40, 4,500, 1, 5. Same thing, same process. We're gonna go to bitmap. We're gonna a little bit different settings this time because we're adding a different kind of layer to this. I want the yellow. We're gonna increase our soft edge to about 0.00, I think it was 6 or 5. Let's do 6. We're gonna decrease our high value here, our high threshold to 0.2. Okay, another bitmap node, I want yellow. And on this one, again, we're gonna leave the soft edge alone, but we're gonna bring down our threshold again to about 0.02. Actually, let's 0.018. Let's do that, 0.018. Okay, and now we're gonna add our erode dilate node again. Oops. And very similar, again, change your filter type to circle, and we're gonna decrease the amount to negative 0.0055. Now, if we were to cycle through, before we connect all these, if we were to cycle through these, what essentially we've done is similar to the concept of the triple glow. We are layering this outliner effect because DaVinci doesn't have a great way to just taper off lines yet. So we've kind of built stages for the head of it, the leading line, middle line, and a tail. And so now what we can do is we're going to merge all of these together. So I'm gonna take the output of this erode dilate, drag it over to the output of this one, and then I'm gonna take the output of our insta1, our very first instant node, and I'm gonna drag it to the output of this merge node right here. Oh, and that didn't work. There we go. Okay, and that didn't work, so let me just do it manually. Let me go ahead and add a merge node. I want this to be the foreground, so green and yellow. Thank you. Okay, so brief summary, real quick. We've got Insta3 merging to Insta2 with Insta3 being the background, Insta2 being foreground, and then those two are merged to our first one. Those being the foreground, the original rectangle being the background. And so now if I were to preview our merge 5 node, our all merged rectangles, this is the line that we've got. Now you could group all these nodes, or you could add what's called an underlay, which is another way of kind of highlighting and grouping things. So I could drag this around here, rename this to, I don't know, outliner, change the color to a nice blue. And that'll group all these together. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this merge 5 node, the one that's connecting all of them together, take the output there and feed it into the mask input of our instanced background node of our second group over here. When we do that, let me go ahead and preview our media out. Bam, there we go. Now this is looking a little thicker than what I wanted to use. So if we wanted to change how thick our bordered outline line was, it's very simple. We can just add another erode dilate node. If I add an erode dilate node here, change the filter type again to circle and just bring that down to, I don't know, let's do negative 0.005. Nope, too thin. What about negative 0.001 or 4? I mean, 4 looks pretty good. Actually, I feel like that looks pretty good right there. And now what we can do is if we want our outliner to be thicker or thinner, we can just play with our erode dilate node here to make it bigger or thinner. A really easy, simple way to control this effect. So you know what, let's go ahead and rename this outliner thickness. Boom. And whew, let's take a quick breath. That is definitely the trickiest part of figuring something like this out. But I mean, if you made it this far, pat yourself on the back, because this is not something that's easy, and it's something that I'm still learning as well, working with bitmaps and mass and mats to create some of the motion graphics that you want. And we are so close to being done with this. Now, as of right now, we have our animation going over the course of 30 frames. And remember, I'm on a 30 FPS timeline, so this is 1 second. That's pretty quick for this thing to cycle all around. What we could do is we could, let's say, jump out to frame 80. Let's move our keyframe out there, so that way it's moving a little bit slower. And if we were to kind of scrub through this, you can see the tail of our outline moving around the border. And again, you could change the length of this if you wanted to be a little bit smaller, or you could make it bigger to be you know, half the frame, however you want this to look. Actually, that's pretty cool. I kind of like that. And if you have trouble remembering why this is the one that really controls the position and length of it, you could change the color of this node. So you could, I don't know, make this green, something like that. Or you could even add another underlay. So you could add an underlay, put it inside here, and make this yay big. Oh, and we could make this rectangle controls. Boom. Let's change the color. The green. I don't know, however you like to get organized in Fusion, you can do that. So that way, you know, hey, this one is the one that controls the position and length. So something sneaky that you could do if you wanted to is, you know, at this point, if you wanted to go into your spline and, you know, start to add some easing in and easing out, or if you wanted to loop it, you could do that. But we could get tricky, and we could actually remove the keyframes on our position here. So I'm gonna double click that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add an anim curve to this. And if you're not familiar with anim curves, essentially the way they work is that they animate something over the duration of a composition and not necessarily on a specific keyframe. So no matter how long we make this Fusion composition, our animation will go through the duration. So if it was a second long, it would do the same animation. If it was 5 seconds long, it would stretch it out to last those 5 seconds. So I'm gonna right click on our position, modify width, and then anim curve. This is gonna unlock our modifier tab. I'm gonna click on the modifier tab. I'm gonna change our source to duration because I want this to last the entire duration of our composition. I'm gonna change the curve to custom. And what we're looking at is the change of our property over time. And right now it is a linear curve, and we're looking at normalized values as well. So our endpoint is 0, and then our endpoint is 1. And so if I were to kind of scrub through this, you can see this will move over the course of our duration, or the course of our composition, excuse me. So the nice thing about this is we can do our easing in and easing out on our anim curve, and it will apply that over a proportionate, or it will proportionately apply this with the length of our composition. Kind of a cool trick. It's something that you could use for whatever you got working on. You don't have to do something like this. And if you want to learn more about anim curves, I'll leave a link to another video to learn more about that. You don't have to do it, but kind of a cool trick. Now, the last thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna make a hole right here so that we can put something underneath it. The way we're gonna do that is I have dragged out our original background over here, made a little space in between our background and all of the line stuff we got going on. And I'm going to add a matte control where we can cut out a little section here. And we're gonna add one last instance. I'm going to drag and select, copy them, and I'm gonna hit Control-Shift-V to paste one final instance. I'm gonna go up to this new instance of our rectangle node, and I am just going to de-instance the solid property. Check that on. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drag the output here, and I'm doing it by holding the right button on my mouse, because what I wanna do is I wanna connect this to the garbage output. You don't want this on the blue, you want this on the garbage input. Excuse me, garbage input, not output. So I'm holding down my right mouse button, releasing, and I want garbage matte. And there you go. And if you have made it this far, pat yourself on the back, nicely done. We have now created our own border outline. So let's go ahead and drag our clip over here, and there you go. Pretty cool, man, pretty cool. Looks pretty good. I know that might have been a little disorganized, so I'm hoping if you did follow along, it was easy enough. Again, the Discord is there if you have more questions. Even if you don't have questions, drop by. There's all sorts of resources there for you. I hope that helps you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.